before we get into 2004, at Armageddon, you're the special guest referee for Randy Orton and Rob Van Dam for the Intercontinental title. And there's a promo you cut before the match. You're wearing a suit and tie. Whose idea was that? That was not very Foley-esque.
No, this is 2004.
The very end of 2003.
Very end of 2003. Okay. I didn't think I returned after Randy.
We haven't done that yet.
Okay,
at this point in the story. So, anyway, we'll keep rolling here. You're
Well,
trying to
the
get
suit, but at that time, I knew the company. I had that grace period where I was allowed to wear everything I wanted, anything I wanted. They thought it felt the character.
This is dress code era.
Dress code era, yeah. So it was like there were three guys that didn't have to adhere to the dress code: Undertaker, Cena, and me. And then when I get talked to about now I have to adhere to it, now it feels like a big part of me's been taken away.
Yeah.
I feel like the guy whose wife is using his body wash.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it served its purpose here because they're trying to, you're trying to get this petition signed for Austin to return, and Orton and Flair are going to interrupt you. And since Orton's gotten the winning pin at Survivor Series over Michaels, you want the stipulation to be upheld. And they threaten you, and you respond by taking off your suit and tie, and what do you know? You've got a referee shirt underneath.
Oh, I see. I completely forgot about that. So the suit and tie worked in that sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
They go 18 minutes. You stop Flair from interfering, but Orton still gets the win. He is now going to use the RKO to become the Intercontinental Champion. And on December 15th, one of the oddest endings of a Monday Night Raw happens in Tampa. Meltzer would write, after spending nearly 2 hours building up Mick Foley's in-ring return against Randy Orton, we saw Foley just walk out of the building. The idea, said to be Foley's idea that he suggested, was done with the idea of getting people talking, since wrestling hasn't done a lot of real cliffhanger endings. Early in the show, Bischoff presented Foley with the idea of a match against Orton, where if Foley won, Bischoff would leave Raw. But if Orton won, Foley would leave. So this is where you did the walkout.
Okay.
And
I forgot that that Eric and I were splitting the GM position. It's all coming back to me now.
This is when you get the spit in your face.
Yep.
And the show even ends 5 or 6 minutes earlier than normal. And Meltzer would say, the feeling watching was empty. As the match was so heavily hyped during the show, it made no sense to do Foley's first match back on Raw. To a TV viewer, it came off like something out of Nitro creativity. I disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're telling a story as opposed to not delivering the main event.
Right. Yeah. I think where we're going is so much bigger. I think Dave would probably tell you that he prejudged that one because it went on to be everything I hoped it would be.
So then Orton kicks off the next episode of Raw, but he's coming out to Your Music, and he's calling himself the new hardcore legend. This is pretty good stuff. Yeah. I assume you're involved in all this creative as well?
Mm-hmm. Well, once I'm gone, they've got the outline. They're not consulting me on a weekly basis, or maybe they are, but I'm not writing the stuff. But they know where I want to go, and Randy's really sinking his teeth into it, which is good.
The January 12th show is at the Nassau Coliseum, your backyard. It's promoted. You're going to be there. Randy Orton reserves a ringside seat for you. He sends a limo for you. Even JR is talking about how you're 15 minutes from your house.
Yeah.
It's the exact opposite of every storyline where you don't show up. But this is not normal for wrestling, but pretty creative.
Yeah. And first of all, I live about 30 minutes from there.
Yeah.
But that's okay. 15 sounds good. And they had a monstrous indie wrestler sitting in that chair. It wasn't just like it looks strange because this guy's bigger than all but a few guys in our dressing room.
Right.
Reserving that seat for me. But again, I like that build-up, We're not baiting and switching. We're building to something bigger.
Yes. Meltzer would write, but regarding Foley, the feeling among those who know the story and where it's going is that nobody in wrestling would be able to do this story without burying themselves but Foley. As mentioned before, this is a story Foley brought to Vince. and most, if not all, of the layout and the timing is his. One of the key parts of the story is to make Orton, which the company needs, and really Foley and Rock need as well, because if people don't see Orton as a top guy, their return at Mania won't mean as much. The Orton-Foley vignettes on television have been tremendous, and Vince has a lot of confidence in you to let you do this, does he not?
Yeah. Especially going back to the idea of leaving people hanging and not providing a match. What if we done a match? Would anybody?
It's a 1 week and it's done.
Yeah, 1 week and it's done, and it just becomes another thing. And instead,
one of 52 Raw main events.
Yeah, and instead it becomes something
special.
Yeah.
So Steve Austin cuts a promo on Raw, demanding you show up at the Rumble and not to be a coward. And then, of course, the Rumble begins. Randy Orton is, of course, number 1, and Dave would write, Test was supposed to be in next. But we went backstage and Test was laid out. Austin is mad and told the guy who did it to get in the ring to take his place. And it was Foley who brought the house down. Pretty nice little twist right there.
Nice little twist and a nice payoff. And, to where in my head, people understand. In my mind, when I laid this angle out, people will understand. I've got a lot of goodwill accrued. They will forgive me, and they will empathize with me. In Vince's mind, they're never going to forgive a guy who has shown cowardice. He gave me the forum to prove him wrong, and I did. And to his credit, he likes to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not all the time.
Sure.
But that's what makes it gratifying, is that you can't prove him wrong all the time, and that he is right a lot of the time. But in this case, he was wrong, and he gave me the forum to prove it.
Do you remember that pop that night? Could you tell, just coming out, boy, we did it. This is special.
You know how I would describe it? Road Warrior-esque. It was a Road Warrior-esque type of pop.
This is the first time, don't get me wrong, you did the physicality with being thrown down the stairs, but the first time you're really doing your thing inside those ropes again. I'm not a wrestler, never going to pretend to know what that is to be like, but I've talked to enough who say, when you're doing it all the time, you almost develop a callus to it.
Yeah.
But then when you take a little bit of a break, it's almost harder on your body because you're not used to it. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing it every night, your body doesn't ever really feel it the way it does if you do it once every so often, if that makes sense. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I still think that takes away from the sacrifices made by the men and women to go out there and do it all the time. But I guess it would be somewhat akin to a marathoner in training running a marathon, as opposed to someone who has not run a marathon in 4 years attempting to go out there and do it. No matter how much work they put into it, it's going to be really, really difficult. And that person is going to be exceedingly sore the next day. I probably should come up with a different scenario, but it's different than anything you've done. And it does the same bruise. And besides, keep in mind, now for 4 years, I haven't taken the pounding that I have.
Right.
So I had been used to, especially in my career, was a lot of stuff was, I thought, high impact as opposed to high risk, even though there were, as I said in my live show that you were at a while back, there were a couple dozen times during the course of that career where I threw caution to the wind and just hoped for the best. Mm-hmm. But I was taking a pounding, whether it's the cactus clothesline, and I'm stopping my momentum by hitting my thighs hard on the ring apron.
Or running into the steps.
Yeah, running into the steps. So I'm taking a pounding. I'm used to taking a pounding, so that when I come back, it's a whole different level of suffering that you carry around. Like I said, that when I was thrown down the stairs, I'm talking 6 to 8 weeks of really intense pain. And in
WCW, that would have been a Wednesday.
Probably, yeah.
So now that you're back and you find yourself, I'm sure when you're out there, there's the adrenaline, and you mentioned earlier that you blew up very quickly, but you've got this adrenaline dump afterwards, and then life starts to set in. Oh, I feel it here or there.
A little flaking on my Marv shirt here. Why didn't you tell me that?
Did you worry about... That's a sweet
Talk
shirt,
about
man.
A guy who could take some punishment, right?
That fella there, he's the original Mankind.
He's got the iron imprint on his head and just kept going.
He's in it to win it.
Unstoppable.
He could have been a part of the slaughterhouse. Marv, if you're listening, wear knee pads. When you're...
By the way, I am going to have my son Mickey come on one of these episodes just to do his imitation of Marv being electrocuted in...
Oh, we got to see that.
In Home Alone 2.
We got to see that. One of the greatest sales in cinema history.
Tremendous. And he also does Marv anticipating the next brick being thrown off, where he's trying to warn Harry, and my son Mickey, he's on the autism spectrum, and I'm so proud of him. He's a wonderful young man, a great guitarist and drummer, but he's a really good mimic. And so I'll bring him on to do Marv being electrocuted. I think you'll love it.
Are you second guessing you talked about being around it a little bit and seeing it up close at Hell in a Cell. You got the bug again. After you do the Rumble, you got to be exhausted. You got to be a little sore. Do you still have the itch just as bad?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those great feelings where the long distance drive, the late night drive, becomes the best possible breeding ground for ideas. So the promos are coming to me. I start getting ideas for what I want to do in the match. But again, this is different than a singles match because now there's 5 guys. Randy and Dave are relatively new. Mm-hmm. I think I've made a pretty big imprint, on the fabric of the sport. And then you have Rock and Rick, who are, 2 of the most popular wrestlers of all time. And so it's not necessarily going to be my vision for WrestleMania as it would be a month later.
The next night on Raw, you cut a tremendous promo that fans should go out of their way to see. And you talked about how when you were young in your career, you had to come up with these horrible things and channel them to be violent in wrestling. And you talked about Pete Rose, and eventually Randy Orton is going to become involved here. Take us through your memory of that night where we get the big spit and you fire back with the chair and Evolution's here. And this is a masterful promo that Dave Meltzer even says, not only every wrestler, but every boxer and MMA fighter in the U.S. should get a tape of this. You can't duplicate it, but the passion and where he got the audience at the end is where you want the audience to be when you're trying to cut a money promo.
Now, is this Hershey, PA, after he hawks the second loogie on me?
This is the second loogie.
Yeah, that was Hershey, PA. That was a really powerful night, partially because I had a friend with me. His name was Marcos, who I later wrote a chapter about. And if you don't mind, I'm going to take you just back for a phone call I received from the Marty Lyons Foundation. I think it was Marty himself. Marty was a great New York Jet, part of the SAC Exchange. And Marty Lyons Foundation is similar to Make-A-Wish, but where they're different is they grant second wishes. So somebody who maybe is battling a long-time illness, he gets their wish to go to Disney at age 7, still struggling a few years later. A smaller group like Marty's can come in and make those wishes come true. So I get a call about a fan in central Pennsylvania and wondering if I might be able to visit with him. So I look at the schedule. I said, hey, we're going to be in Penn State in 2 weeks. And then there's silence on the line. And I said, is he not expected to make it 2 weeks? And they said, this is a day-by-day thing. And I said, I can be there tomorrow, right? It's about a 3-hour drive. And I remember they put his mom on the phone, Rachel, and they said, Mick would like to come by your house. And she says, he wants to visit my boy. And she broke down in tears, which made I welled up. And I was there, whether it was the next day or 2 days later, and I'd probably been in that young man's living room 3 times by the time we got to Penn State, and he was still hanging in there. And I remember he was the first gentleman I ever saw had a smart TV that he could get videos that you paid for. And not that he was paying for this, but he pulled up my Kane Dewey promo. Mm-hmm. And so by this time, I'd been in their house 3 different times, spent most of the day watching wrestling and movies with this great young man. And the mom has one of the great comments I've ever heard. She watches the promo. She looks at me and says, I don't know who that man on television is, but he is not the same man sitting on my couch, which is the highest form of praise.
Of course.
For a promo. So he makes it to, he's in Penn State, and this is where Vince has basically just let me have the run of the place and let the young man have the run of the place. Bruce was in on it too. Bruce, he asks people in merchandise, they come down, they get the championship title, the boys are coming up, and men and women giving him hats. You know, he could not have treated him better. He gets to cut a promo backstage with the Dudleys. He's there in his wheelchair by ringside, and Randy Orton and Batista are wearing caps at that time. I guess it was like their crew type of thing. And he said, I've always wanted to be in the ring. And Randy looks at Dave, and I barely knew Dave at this point, you know. He looks at Dave, and within about 5 seconds, Batista's got this young man on his shoulder, and he's gently placing him in the ring. And this young man closes his eyes, he puts his arms up in the air, like it's the happiest he's ever been. And Mom, just constant supply of tears running down her face. So that's the backdrop that I have going into that night. And even after the big loogie promo, when we go off the air, Bill Goldberg had a guest there too. And we led the crowd in chants for both Marcos and Bill's friend. And so I wish I'd wiped off the loogie, you know, when I was after the thing. But as far as the promo goes, a promo which was not popular with a few of the heels backstage who thought I made Randy look weak. And it's like, guys,
because you criticized his spit?
Because I stopped and I cut a promo about how I've been spit on, I've been peed on, I've thrown up on, pooped on, and all this. And that I remember he did look fearful as I was cutting that promo this far away from his face. And I said, I was bleeding in 6 continents while you were still latched onto your mother's breast. And people, and I guess some of the people, the main players, thought I made him look weak. And it's like, remember the big picture. Like, you have to remember how Triple H acknowledged Cactus Jack as a threat. If you brush me off after everything you've done to me, spit in my face, beating me up, I was taking a major beating week after week after week after week, and you don't give me a hope spot.
And you would tuck tail.
Yeah, I tuck tail and gone. And besides, you're getting the win.
Yeah.
So now you have to acknowledge you need to acknowledge the threat in front of you in order for you overcoming that threat to mean anything.
Or else who'd he beat?
Yeah, if you've beaten a guy you've built up to be nothing, then you've beaten nobody.
Yeah.
And so I know a good promo when I hear it, you know, and I think I even alluded to it in the 2006 book or 2007 book and said, you don't think it was good? Ask Randy Orton how he thought that promo went, because the difference, we'll get to this when we have the singles match.
You drew blood on yourself in the promo.
Yeah, I did.
Too.
Yeah, I did the little hard way on myself, which is always effective, you know.
You did an interview afterwards where someone asked if Orton knew, and you said something like, Orton's not a good enough actor to fake being shot.
Not at that time he wasn't. Yeah. That's right.
It's interesting, though, that not everybody saw what you saw. And you wrote in your book that it was several top WWE stars. Do we not want to say that it was Triple H? Because that's certainly the inference.
I think it was Triple H. I think Triple H thought I made him look weak.
Yeah.
And I don't think Rick was happy about me talking about being on 6 continents, because I don't know why. I thought it was a promo that everyone would have appreciated, seeing where you're going. I don't know. It bothered me that that's something that seemed so easy to understand to me, and I think most of the fans got it too, would be a source of conflict at all.
Fans talk about this era as being the era where it feels like things backstage became more political. I know politics have always been involved in wrestling, but would you agree with that assessment, that it felt like it started to become a little more political than maybe during the Attitude Era?
I do feel like that sense of camaraderie and the idea that we were all rooting for each other was...
It almost was like a class system at this point.
Yeah, at that point, I remember it not being, because we had the common goal, which was to beat WCW.
Right.
We were still competitive about our spots, but I did feel like, and I was really busy every time I was there. I don't think I realized it until maybe the next time I came back that it wasn't the same as it had been. That there was a little more negativity.